Hello everyone, it's Jin'Taan here, and I am joined by Suitonia, fellow CSM alumni and theory crafting nerd, and we're going to be discussing the recently released Beat Around the Boosh patch. I just did a read through of it on my channel, and this one should be going up on Suitonia's. Um, so yeah, this has been a pretty cool patch, and it comes out of the announcement that came at EVE Vegas, where CCP Rise kind of revealed, I guess, the new CCP Rise and I guess CCP Burger revealed the new strategy of CCP's development plan going forwards, where they're going to try and have a roadmap every quarter, and on top of that, they're going to try out this 2 week live balance passes focused. I guess the second version of Chaos Era almost, leading up to the end of December. And this is the first patch of that type, and I think that's something that's really exciting because it's something that I lobbied for really heavily during my time on the CSM. I wanted CCP to, I guess, take some cues from the MOBA style of game development, or even to use a more nerdy one, Magic the Gathering, where you want to be constantly iterating and bringing new challenges for people to solve in the gameplay. And hearing CCP Burger echo some of those sentiments is something that I think is really promising, because a lot of people felt like the Chaos Era was too big, and I think in some respects I agree with that. And what we've got here is a really juicy patch that's going to change some things, and then CCP is going to be able to just let it settle, see where things are, and then poke again. And they're not going to have to just walk back everything they did, and that's really important, because the Blackout did have some good parts and it had some bad parts, but at the end of it, it impacted activity too much, as CCP Burger kind of admitted, I guess, on the keynote.
Yeah, and there was a lot of interesting data, I think, that CCP Larrikin showed about how it really impacted the newer players a lot more than veteran players.
Oh, really? I haven't seen that presentation yet. Is it up on YouTube?
Yeah, it should be. I think it's Larrikin's like data presentation. It's pretty interesting.
But yeah, like the problem was that it was such a big change that they couldn't really scale it back. There wasn't the ability to do that, so it was either an on or off.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think there are a lot of players who really enjoyed the blackout, like myself, and a lot of people who are like very PvP orientated, who also ended up being disappointed by it being turned off as well. Just as there are a lot of people who really disliked the blackout and were really relieved to have it reset.
Yeah. But anyway, let's get into talking about what actually has changed here. So the first thing is that we've got a nice chunk of just balance changes, and the first of those is a massive change to how booshing works, because now micro jump field generators are only going to be able to move 25 ships out of the things that are in their range. So you're no longer going to be able to have these massive 100-man bomber fleets or these 100-man Raven fleets being moved around by a core of command destroyers, or at least it's going to be much more difficult to do so.
Yeah, it makes it it is still possible, but it means that it puts like an unreasonable amount of sort of delegation that needs to be done. It also makes it significantly harder to use logistics while in these smaller groups, right? Like, because in theory, if you had like a separate FC, I guess, for each like individual group of 25, you could still function pretty well. Although I think Intosis is was like a similar sort of design, right? In theory, you would have like five FCs who are all in different systems, but I think not a lot of people really adapted well to that, or and I do think that there is problems with that too, right? And it's also a lot harder for things like logistics and support ships, right? Because they can only really support the group that they're in, so it's a lot harder to stay up, and it's just bad in terms of like how most fleet fights actually work.
It's just due to how scaling works. Like,
Yeah.
In a world where, say you fought a 25-man fleet versus a 100-man fleet, you could inflict like 10 casualties even if you lost your entire fleet there. It would make sense to probably have this more scattered approach because you could make it difficult to move, you could hold them in one place for a decent amount of time, and you would be taking other objectives whilst that was going on, and you'd just be trading one node for four. But in practice, that's not how it works because of the scalability of a lot of power in a fleet level through things like logistics, through things like recons, through things like just raw alpha. You can't really scatter your Munin fleet into four chunks of 25 because your opponent is going to be able to whip around the entire constellation of a fleet of 100 and kill each and every single one of those 25s and not lose a single person. It's all about the
Yeah, and
concentration of force.
yeah, and links are important too. This change, I can talk about it from the perspective of we from Volta, in that we normally use the like Pontifex groups to help extract our Lokis or legions, and it doesn't really change too much for us. But we generally don't really have more than 50 ships on the field that need to be extracted. So the way that we do it now would be just to have like we'll just have like a group of Ponties and one of them gets scrammed voluntarily and you scram the anchor too, and then the rest of the Ponties can spool, and then the anchor and the remaining Ponty will be left. Then you unscram the Ponty, then he can boost the rest of the group away, right? You only really need two for us, but that's a lot harder to do in bigger fleets, and also it stops like mobility during a fight, right? Like you can still use them to run away, essentially, like the tactic that I just described, but you can't really use them to dodge Lance Doomsdays all the time, or just run away from fighter blobs.
Yeah, it does make them kind of significantly worse against capitals, which I think is something I saw a lot of people having a problem with, and it's very understandable because
Yeah.
those Stuka fleets were one of the best ways to try and snipe out Rorquals and things like that from under the supercarrier blanket, or sorry, under the super capital umbrella.
Yeah, this change, I guess we should mention, has been a little bit controversial in that sense. I think almost everyone universally agrees and accepts that chain booshing was overpowered and problematic for the health of the game. Although I think where the controversy comes from is the fact that booshing is getting nerfed while super capital umbrellas, which has been probably the biggest balance issue that Eve's had for the past 2 years, along with citadels, and essentially booshing is getting nerfed before any more significant capital nerfs.
Well, there are some capital nerfs at the very least, but yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that this did make me think of, though, is the possibility of using this to your advantage to some degree in kind of larger fleet fights, like being able to pick off a small chunk of 25 ships and annihilating them with like a fast reaction fleet is something that sounds like it could be possible. We've already seen assault frigates do work trying to do stuff like that in the past. Retri fleets picking off people who fall away from anchors and stuff like that, or jackdaw fleets catching stragglers, being quite a common thing that I've seen try do in our fighting against them. Like whenever we finish up an objective, or either if we lose a fight, they will reship into jackdaws and they'll come and hunt people as we're running away. If we win the fight, they'll still form jackdaws after that, and they'll try and catch people who don't align quickly as we're leaving. It's this very smart kind of just guerrilla, making sure you have to work for everything approach. And I can't help but think that maybe you could translate that into a bigger fight now with the ability to pick off like those small groups from an enemy fleet, but without taking like hundreds of them with you.
Yeah, potentially, right? Like you could do some weird stuff like an expanded probe Pontifex or something, or some other ship that has combat probes out that then just warps into a blob. Maybe if you get like two or three of them, because you don't really care about the randomness aspect as much. If it's well, it's still difficult, right? But I think like you could at least like have one warp off, then you warp the next one down, and then you can just like pick some groups off with it, assuming that you survive for the 5 seconds it takes to boost your fleet.
Yeah, I think in general it just makes defensive bubbling even more important, but defensive bubbling is probably still the most important thing in this meta, like just fundamentally, I think.
Yeah, and I think
At
the
least,
design of
sorry, for
this is
large fleet
pretty cool.
fights.
I know, while on the CSM, booshing was something that came up, quite a lot in the last year, and this design seems to be probably the most favorable design, I'd say, because it doesn't really interfere with things like spearfishing or like skillful use of command destroyers in sort of like smaller areas or like splitting up groups and things like that, as well as it doesn't also affect the sort of excavator booshing and stealing either, which I think was a concern. Maybe not so much now because after the balance changes to Rookles in March, they are quite a bit more reasonable now. But I think Rookles still are a problem.
Uh, um, I don't know. I feel like this is almost the nuclear option. I feel like this is actually one of the harsher ones they could have done because it does remove that option for fleet-based mobility. And I feel like that was something that was very interesting. Stukas were very powerful, and they were the kind of thing that did impact fleet fights as well as this whaling capital killing operation. You did have to worry about them constantly, and they were basically just impossible to kill. They had the same advantages as the ravens to some degree, although they were even harder to catch because they have such great line time. You know, personally, I would have preferred to see it go down the route that I've talked about before when I wrote my original article about what I thought was wrong with Boosh Ravens, which would have been to just make it so that they couldn't Boosh bubbles or Hictors with a bubble up, because that would stop people from effectively making it impossible for them to be tackled down. At least with Snookers, you can theoretically get people on top of them. They can't snipe at you from 300 kilometers away.
Yeah,
They,
that would have been interesting too. I mean, there are a lot of ways they could have tackled this. So
yeah, I mean it's not a bad way. Like it'll work. I'm just sad to see Stukas die. I'm kind of sad to see Bush Ravens die as well. You know, I definitely faced off against them a few times, and they were very difficult to deal with. But they were something that took a lot of skill. And hey, I guess it's just the way it goes. Sometimes we can't have too much skill.
yeah, we have supers to that, right?
All right. Now, the second one is something that's going against the super capitals, though, and that is a BFG nerf, which takes the signature resolution of the ship from 2000, which is about what a battleship with not an MWD on, but just a battleship is at, right? For
Well, most
signals?
battleships tend to be around 400 to 600 meters sig, based on if they're shield or armor, and depending on which one, like the Macarial has the lower sig, for example. But I think realistically they would probably be at 2000. I mean, assuming in most battleship fights you probably have 3 target painters on the primary from a Hugin or something, so
Yeah. Well, to be fair, the BFG wasn't really just hitting
used that way
primaries,
though.
you know.
Yeah,
Like I just know that I've seen like two BFG like shotgun just annihilate an entire FCon Abaddon fleet, and that's like 240k HP gone with two ships.
yeah. The boson was pretty insane. I think the most unfair way it was used was just used as like solo gate camping, where you would just boson a gate, and literally, I think almost every single ship in the game would die to a boson before you would deaccelerate and could take action and jump through the gate. So it was just like basically just imagine like a Rix and King smart bomb, except you don't need any of the like coordination or the planning or setup to do it. You just need like literally one guy can do it, and there is also almost no risk doing it under your own super capital umbrella too.
It's like smart bombing pods in low sec. It's like that, basically that exact same mechanic.
Yeah, except for there's a little more risk involved in smart bombing pods in low sec.
yeah, that's the funniest thing. It's actually more risky,
because
and you're gonna
yeah,
get
a
way
bomber
more
could be quick and
frags.
kill you.
Yeah.
Whereas there's almost no way you're going to be able to kill like a bosoning titan in an umbrella region, right? So in fact, I believe since the Black Ops ended, only 4 titans have died.
Wow.
So
Still,
yeah,
that might have something to do with the slow decline of two of probably the bigger capital hunting entities, though.
yeah,
Rip
snuffed
Snuff
out
didn't skill
the
you.
yeah. Yeah, effectively, if you didn't have a SIG of 2000, which would be most subcapital ships in almost every reasonable situation, it's a 5 times application nerf. So you would take 5 times less damage. You take 5 times less damage from a boson now.
Yeah. So this is something in the region of, and well, it's even better than that because it's logarithmic, I believe. So things like Munins are just going to be, they're just going to take no damage at all, pretty much, from bosons now.
Yeah, so like before, for example, something like a Caracal would take 60k damage from a boson before it could decelerate and activate the gate. And now it only take like 12k, which means it will survive pretty fine. Like it'll lose like maybe a third of his shields or something.
Oh, that's a really
Probably
good example.
probably a bit more than that. But yeah, I think it still leaves boson sort of as like an anti-capital group weapon. You can still like come in and like doomsday boson some dreads or something,
Yeah, that was
but it
kind of how
won't.
they saw them be used in the
Yeah,
continuation war during 2018.
yeah, but now they won't nearly be as effective as just used to just destroy subcapital ships. I mean, they could still be pretty powerful, right? Like if you double shotgun an Abaddon group, you're still taking away like half of their EHP. It'll be like almost the same as like a bombing run on the Abaddon fleet.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just going to be like they're just going to not be able to solo pwn fleets, which
Yeah,
I think is good. I don't think. I
you
mean,
can
I
still use.
personally don't think that they should have had AoE Doomsdays in the first place, but I'm quite an extremist on this.
Yeah, I also agree. I think it's very difficult to balance AoE weapons.
All
And
right.
I guess we could say rest in peace, the boson ratting.
Yep. I
Uh,
think my favorite comment that I read on Reddit is that Titan owners should be able to make money too, and I'm like, you have a
yeah,
Titan. What are you making more money for at that point? You have the biggest ship in the game.
yeah. Run USMC, who's I believe he's like a pretty high-ranking FC and sort of one of like the main dudes in Test Alliance. Posted a video of him trying to boast on a haven after the patch, and it didn't even clear out the first wave. And yeah, there on Reddit there are a few gold comments at the bottom about how a new Bro Titan's gonna make money now, and things like that, which are kind of bizarre.
Yeah, it's uh, I feel bad for those people in some regard, but I hope that they can adapt. I hope that it isn't the kind of change that drives people out because it took away people's ability to kind of enjoy these large ships on a daily basis. Like that could be a concern that CCP might have here. Um,
Yeah,
I
I
would
saw
understand that.
some people concerned a little bit about the hunting aspect of like Titans are not going to be out as much, but then again, I think a lot of people have also said that like only 4 Titans have died, and I think like none of them were bosoning Titans as far as I know. So I
Hmm.
haven't checked, but if only 4 Titans have died since Blackout ended, it's not really like a huge detriment to hunting.
Yeah. So overall? I think this is a good change. You think it's a good change?
Yeah, I think it's a great change.
Cool. So let's move on to the Dromi changes, I guess, which are pretty
Yeah,
good. I'm kind of happy about it, I guess. I would have preferred a harsher nerf, but I think this is probably good. What we've got here is the web amounts of the fighters have been reduced by 5% by both T1 and T2, meaning that they now only web 10% for T1 and 15% for T2.
yeah, and it's a little bit of a bigger nerf than it seems to because like that's per fighter, right? So now instead of webbing 45% from a set of Tech One drummies, they now only web 30%, which is comparatively much less because it's like a percentage decrease. So you go from being webbed to like just under half your speed to only being webbed like a third of your speed. So
Yeah, and you said it allowed people to effectively actually get out of being perma-tackled by supers a lot easier. Do you know what the breakpoint was previously and what it is now?
yeah, before it was about 3k a second. So if you don't have any kind of like speed enhancing modules, if we're just talking about like a super that has three fighter support units, sirens went like 1.34k a second just by them, like before any like kind of MWD ability. So and because Drommies used to web you by 60%, to be able to escape from them, you had to go faster than 3k a second. And what that meant is that supers could pretty much like perma tackle anything in the game that wasn't an interceptor or like some like super nano assault frigate, which was pretty unreasonable, really.
Yeah, that does not sound great. I've just kind of tried to avoid places that have supers whenever I've been roaming, if I'm perfectly honest with you. I kind of
Yeah, I'm
gave
not
up
sure
on
what
that.
the not sure what the new break point is now, but I think it would be like probably closer to like 4k a second now. Oh, sorry, not 4k a second. Like probably closer to like 2.2k a second now. So at least like things like sabers and like faster nano cruisers can probably outrun them.
That's going to be pretty good then. So it's going to give people more of a chance to kite around these super capital umbrellas and maybe do things to the subcaps that are supporting them, which is,
Yeah,
I guess, kind of ideal, really.
yeah, and I think another good point to mention too is before, if you're using like Tech 2 Drommies in a full stack, they would web you down by 60%, which is the same as like a normal web, like from a traditional webbing ship. So, for example, a Hugin or something. Whereas now it's only 45% on Tech 2, and realistically, people normally use Tech 1 Drommies in fights, right? So now it's like only half the strength as like bringing your own Hugin. So I think what's really good about this change too, right, is it encourages you to bring like subcapital support, because now the subcapital options are so much well, they're actually better to use instead of being the same strength or only slightly weaker.
Yeah, and I think that's great. Like, been one of my problems with the way super capitals have gone lately is the fact that it feels like they can do every role. It feels like they have all of the tools that subcapitals have, just in this super capital format. That means sometimes you have to make other sacrifices to make it work, but they still do have these tools. And I don't think that's an ideal way for the game to be balanced. I think you want capitals and subcapitals to have to work in concert to create the ideal composition. That's the direction the game should head in, at least in a perfect world. It's probably not going to ever work out like that just because of the nature of the metagame, but and the nature of logistics as well. It's a lot easier to supply and figure out a doctrine of 7 ships than it is to figure out a doctrine of 28 different ships all working in some mad contraption. I'm very much aware of that. But
Yeah, I
still.
think we're both in the camp that we'd rather just Drommies and Sirens be TP and damp drones, or some other support option rather than actually providing tackle.
Yeah.
And
Sort of
I
had
guess
an
it's worth
interesting idea as
mentioning.
well with making them like AB only.
Yeah, I know on the previous CSM, Sirens were probably the thing we brought up the most, and I think Sirens didn't actually receive a nerf in this patch, but hopefully, I know CCP Rise did mention that when he did his presentation, that they weren't nerfing Sirens here, but it was on their radar, so hopefully we might see a change to Sirens in the future.
Yeah, who knows? I guess we'll only see with time there. And
Yeah.
go.
Oh, I was gonna say now we get onto the juicy one, although put the logistics guys in NoSec are pretty unhappy about it.
Although this is the one that's not going to actually impact the game a huge amount for at least a month or so, because of the way they ended up getting around the whole grandfathering thing. There is going to be a grace period where structures will still be allowed to work as they do right now.
Yeah, so we should probably mention
Oh
the
yeah,
actual change, right? So
sorry, yeah, yeah.
so answer Black's jump gates and now wasn't mentioned in the presentation, but also Sinojammers, which is going to be a big thing for big fights actually, now have to be anchored at least 500 kilometers from other upwell structures, which means that they won't be in that you won't be able to use the structure to shoot people who are on the structure itself, right? So now what that means is that you can effectively camp Anti-Black's jump gates, or you can do stuff like anchor bubbles on them and like sit a group of people on it and shoot it without being shot by the structure defending it. I don't think that was necessarily a problem for the weaker structures like Fortizars and below, right? Because even in Volta, like if we had a 10-man gang, we could sit on a Fortizar fine if we just had like one logistics ship. You just ping whoever's getting shot by the structure, just pings off because it takes so long to arrive. The missiles take so long to arrive at 200 kilometers, and the bomb's pretty easy to deal with by just warping off, warping back, and it disjoints it. But the main problem, right, was the fact that they were anchorable in Keepstar Doomsday range, and the Keepstar Doomsday is I really don't like it. It basically does 5 million damage alpha strike, so it will kill any ship in the game, like including monitors. Any subcapital ship in the game dies to it 100% of the time. So it was basically just like horrible. You could never do anything on a Keepstar grid without feeding your FC
or feeding a logistics or something else
Yeah.
important. Yeah, I definitely think this is going to be a good change when it comes in, but it's something that is going to take a while to actually be reflected in reality.
Yeah, and I was actually I've been watching Ron USMC stream part of the fraternity conflict, and it was pretty ridiculous. Them they had to make like a really specific rogue fit to be able to bash Anti-Blacks on fraternity's Keepstars, so that they could shoot them from 501 kilometers away, so they couldn't get doomsdayed by the Keepstar.
Yeah.
Like things like that are pretty degenerate. But fraternity would never undock anything to fight them. It would just be like one gunner who would just doomsday the FC or whatever, just to inconvenience them.
Yeah, and that was the same thing with the Sinojammers, and I think especially with the Sinojammer change, actually, what that's gonna do is that's gonna really force people to do a lot more active defense. Because whilst it's not going to be money for people, I think people are going to realize pretty quickly that poking a Sinojammer is a good way to get a response.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the healthiest part of this change, right? Is ever since the sort of outpost to Citadel conversion, we've missed a lot of sort of tools to sort of ring the doorbell, if you know what I mean, like a way just to try and provoke a fight. In the past, people used to just Intosis just Intosis the clone bay.
Or you just go shoot the station.
Yeah.
That was what you used to do. You pile like 100 dudes in a fleet. You'd all get out in drakes. You wouldn't even have any T1 logistics because those didn't exist yet. And you'd just tell everyone to shoot the station, and then you just get a fight. It's great.
Yeah, well, you just camp their stagings on dock, and you'd kill some idiots that think they could permatank 50 people in a Hyperion or something.
Yeah, it was great. I miss stuff like that.
Yeah. So now I think at least it'll probably help a lot for short-term content generation, because now you literally can just bring 50 people and go to their jump gate, and if they don't respond and give you a fight within, I think it takes 15 minutes to reinforce, right? If you're at the damage cap, 15 to 20 minutes, I can't remember. But essentially, you can just reinforce someone's jump gate and say, give us a fight in 15 minutes or you lose your jump gate for the day. And I think that's a pretty powerful way to get people to respond.
Mm-hmm. And they're vulnerable 24/7 as well.
Yeah. The good thing about flex structures, too, is that you can actually come out on the same day. I know we reinforced one that was bizarrely anchored at a sun for some reason. I think it was XIX space, and we only got a 3-hour timer on it.
Yeah.
So potentially, right, you could if you're shooting some US time zone dudes, right, you could have your Euros reinforce it. They either get a fight or it gets reinforced, and your US time zone dudes can then finish it off.
That's always that's probably one of the best ways you can do it as well, because it gives you so much initiative as an attacker. Like normally the defender wants to try and spam on that second timer, but if they only have 3 hours to do it, it's a hell of a lot more difficult, and you're going to have all all of the ability to set it up and plan to have your US time zone there potentially. It's
Yeah,
going
and
to
that's
give
one
it,
of the things that's
yeah,
been missing, right? Is just being able to plan out fights in the short term. With Citadels, having free timers, it's near impossible. You don't really have any agency as the attacker anymore.
yeah. I don't think this is going to work very much in kind of like smaller alliances, but if you're thinking about like living in NPC space and you're poking someone who you've deployed like next to, like say you deploy to Venal because you're going to bash Deadco or something like that, poking a Sinojammer is going to be the exact same way poking a POS like an R64 POS used to be.
Yeah, so yeah, it's pretty cool.
You know, you probably won't see super capitals drop to defend it, but you'll also probably get a good fight out of it. At least that's what I hope will happen. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, and at least you also can't do degenerate stuff like have like long range titans like in the middle of a keep star defending Sino jammers anymore.
Yeah, that's also good. Anyway, do you want to get on to some of the other stuff in the patch?
Oh, sure, yeah. We've kind of covered most of the juicy things, so there are some interesting things, I suppose, that's left over.
I think the Korean localization is probably good. I don't know if we've seen
Yeah.
like a spike of new players, but hey, Siege Green's a good alliance. I hope they get
Yes,
more people. Docto is a good corp. I hope they get more people.
yeah, I believe CSP is doing a presentation tomorrow, right, in Korea, November the
E-
14th. So hopefully there might be a spike of people. Like Eve's definitely a game that gets a lot more fun the more people are playing it. So I'm pretty excited to see the Koreans come over if they do.
Yeah, the G Star. Although apparently, because they are now actively publishing in Korea, they have to do a bunch of the Korean localization stuff. So like they got to give like playtime warnings and tell people to take breaks and make sure you're over 18 to play it and stuff like that.
That's pretty funny.
Because they can't claim that they're not attempting to produce for the Korean market anymore now that they have Korean localization. RIP. Anyway, yeah, you've also got this little thing which actually makes a ton of sense from what we know from our time on the CSMs, actually. And that's the changing of a minimum increment for placing bounties on individual characters being put up to 1 million ISK. And this is something that I guess you wouldn't really know unless you've been told, but that actually has getting a bounty put on you. It was a significant reason for people just quitting the game, or at least it used to be, because people didn't understand what it was. They saw they had a wanted sign on their head, and they were just like, "Well, I guess someone's just gonna immediately kill me now because Eve's a horrible game, and everyone tells me that Eve's a game full of people who'll kill you for anything," and they just quit because they think it's
Yeah,
how it works.
there used to be people who like essentially griefed new players, right, by going into like the rookie help chat and just like putting a 100k ISK bounty on everyone in there, and people would freak out. I still think they should maybe prevent people from being able to put bounties on a character that's like under 30 days old, because 1 million ISK is still like nothing if you're someone who's trolling, right? Like
Yeah,
1 million ISK is still, I think, throwaway for most players. So
yeah. I think 1 million. I think a 30-day delay is probably the better idea as well. I liked it when you suggested it as well. But yeah, then you got like just some minor skill changes, just cleaning it up, making everything have parity. So now drones don't require drones 3 to actually do anything. Yay? Question mark.
yeah, I mean, there's been some updates to the overview stuff, like in the user interface. Like UI changes are great because Eve's UI is still really bad.
It's mostly just the default though, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like, and the changing of the watch list and drone HP bars, which people were super mad about for some reason.
yeah.
And I was just like, I think whenever anything changes, our instant reaction is just re. But no, I'm sure we'll just get used to this. It's like the Neocom, even if it is bad or worse than what it used to be, we'll get used to it. It doesn't really matter. We are used to shit UIs. We are EVE Online players. It's all good.
Yeah, they've made some changes to the NPE too. I mean, they brought back the wallet Neocom icon like a few weeks ago, which I
Yeah.
have no idea why they removed.
I like that new wallet that they showed off though at Vegas. That was cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, especially if they make some changes to like the way loyalty points work by making them more visible. Because I know, like right now, like if you don't know what they are, like there's a lot of new players I know that have like run missions and like had no idea what loyalty points were or how they even like went about like spending them.
I mean, I hope that it being in the wallet means that CCP has finally figured out that they need to rework how the loyalty point system works so that they can do like loyalty point taxes and stuff like that. Because that's something that historically they've not been able to do because loyalty points are effectively mission reward tokens that are in your head. They aren't actually they're not a currency, they're an item that's basically stored in your character's brain. Shit's wild.
Yeah, it could be interesting,
I
I suppose.
CCP devs, feel free to tell me in the comments how completely wrong I am, but that's what I understood as a completely technologically illiterate person when a dev tried to explain to me why LP taxes don't possibly work.
Yeah, I believe it because like the LP rewards too, like the way they're coded, I believe is that like they're like missions.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
Bizarre.
Oh well. But yeah, other than that, there's just a couple of bug fixes, a couple of VXX fixes, but overall, yeah, this is a nice patch. It's not some groundbreaking, holy mother of God, this is the best patch ever, like the thing we had in April, which is probably the best patch Exodus had in like a year and a half, by my personal opinion.
Yeah. Well, more of these, please. Like one of these every 2 weeks is better than just an April patch a year.
I mean, we got. I mean, what? Like, let me look how long have we been recording? We got like 35 minutes of just us talking very happily about some changes that have happened in EVE Online. Have we had anything like that in like the past 2 to 3 months? Because it
No,
doesn't
not
feel like it
really.
to me. It feels like every time there's been a change in the past 2 to 3 months, we've looked at it and we've been like, oh God, why? Or something has felt like a problem. And this just feels good. This is a breath of fresh air. This feels like a step in the right direction. I'm really happy to see it.
Yeah, the only real like memorable patches that I can remember were the Sino change and like the Vex and Navy issue change, like other than April.
Hmm. Well, obviously we had the blackout, we had the drifter
Yeah,
attacks, we've had a lot of memorable things. It's just that a lot of them, I don't want to say
are no
felt like
longer in the game.
misses.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, maybe some of these won't end up staying forever. But it's more that I don't really know how to put it, but these changes feel like they are giving players more tools. Like that's something that I think is always very important. Rather than taking stuff away.
yeah, and at least the way they're doing this now, I think it's a lot easier, right, to just roll back one change. So, for example, I don't know, maybe the Drummy change was too much. It's a lot easier to just revert that Drummy change instead of like throwing like absolutely everything out.
Yeah. It also feels like they're getting to the root of the problem here. Like they're not
Yeah,
attacking all the things around super capitals. They're actually sitting and being like, okay, maybe super capitals are the problem. Let's test out some nerfs to them that are more subtle than just a straight up DPS reduction, and we'll see what that does. And that's great.
yeah. I think that was one of the problems with the initial fax change that they tried to make last year, right? In that uh, everyone agrees that faxes were a problem. I think we all were kind of happy with the direction they were going in, but like trying to hit like five different things at the same time just kind of instantly triggers people. And whereas like hitting one thing every month instead is a lot easier to like ease people into the change.
Yeah, and it also allows you to just check and make sure like you get it at the right point, so you don't just completely drake a ship right out of the gate.
Yeah, the heavy missiles are a good example of that.
R.I.P. in pieces. But yeah, do you have any other real thoughts here though, Suitonia?
No, pretty good patch. I'm really happy. I'm really looking forward to the patch in 2 weeks time, the rapid fire update, potentially some buffs to order cannons.
Oh baby, I can't believe it. He's finally gonna do it. Rise has finally seen the light. Hallelujah.
I think what CCB needs to do is just go through your back catalog of videos and just make it so you're wrong now, so that the videos no longer have a...
uh, yeah, well, I could say a lot of the same things about yourself. You've pitched a lot of great things in articles from time to time, at least by my reckoning. Anyway, let's not circle jerk too much, and let's let the audience know that they should leave comments below to please the algorithm for you, Suitonia, and tell us what you think about this patch. Are you happy with these changes? Do you feel like there was something egregious missed in it? You know, is there anything you think in particular needs a buff right now?
Yeah, make sure to mention how you're coping as a new player with a Titan.
Absolutely, and hopefully in 2 weeks we'll be sitting down and going through this exact same thing again. I know I can't wait.